Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amber Stimson. I am the Local Preservation Commission Certified Local Government Coordinator for the state of North Carolina. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thank you, Kim and company, for inviting Brett and I to speak to you. Are there any commissioners or staff that work with local preservation commissions in the audience? Excellent. So if you have a certified local government commission, this will count as your 3 hours of annual CLG training. So congratulations. And thank you for coming this afternoon. So I thought that I would start today by talking a little bit about the legal framework that establishes local preservation commissions. And it all started kind of in 1966 with the passage of the National Historic Preservation Act. Congress passed this act, and Section 106 of this act requires federal agencies to consider the effects their undertakings will have on properties that are listed in or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. It also created the National Register of Historic Places and also provided a framework where the feds could work with the states to identify and list historic properties. Well, around the same time, the state also passed legislation that allowed local governments to form local preservation commissions. And this is specifically outlined in North Carolina General Statute 160A 400.7, giving local governments the authority to form local preservation commissions. There we go. Okay, Section 101 of the National Historic Preservation Acts specifically tells the states that they have to establish a state historic preservation office. And in North Carolina, we are known as the North Carolina State Historic Preservation Office, but in Alabama, it's the Alabama Historical Commission. In Kentucky, it's the Kentucky Heritage Council. In Mississippi, it's the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. So they're not always necessarily known as the State Historic Preservation Office, but luckily in North Carolina, that's exactly what we go by. And there's several things that our office does, and I've listed a few of them here, up here on this slide, but this is not all that we do. Obviously, as Brett has talked about earlier, our office reviews state historic tax credit projects. We also support local governments by offering technical advice. Local governments and commissions who are interested in surveying areas to designate as local historic districts or as National Register listed districts, we have staff who support them in doing that. We also have staff who review projects that are being initiated with federal funds or benefits to ensure that those projects will not have an adverse effect on historic properties. And if they do, then they can mitigate against that adverse effect. And then there's my component, which I am here to offer technical assistance to local preservation commissions and their staff and local governments as a whole. Okay, so there's a couple of different types of designations. And Brett touched on this earlier when he showed you HPO Web. So you have federal designations or National Historic Landmarks. And National Historic Landmarks are only designated by the feds, okay? Meaning the National Park Service specifically. Can anyone think of any National Historic Landmarks that are in the state of North Carolina? Don't be shy. I know it's like afternoon and everyone wants to take a nap, but help me out. Actually, I don't think Tryon Palace is a National Historic Landmark. Can anyone tell me why it wouldn't be? It's a reconstruction, right? It's not the original Tryon Palace. Okay, anyone else? Biltmore. I think that is a National Historic Landmark. Yes, it is. Okay, very good. Anyone else? Kitty Hawk, yes, the visitor center. Very good. You guys are so on your game today. Okay. Also, the USS North Carolina. Then you have properties that are listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and those can either be listed individually or as districts. Were you going to say something? Chimney Rock. I'm not sure about Chimney Rock. Maybe it should be, maybe you can lobby for that. Not sure, but I can definitely check into it for you and let you know after this presentation is over. But yeah, so the states can nominate those properties, and then the feds ultimately list those properties in the National Register. The great thing about local designations is it's all at the local level. So the states can, the local governments, through their commissions, can designate historic properties or properties they feel are significant on a local level. They send their recommendations to us, we review them, we comment. Our comments are non-binding, so local governments can choose to designate historic properties no matter what the state says. So the total authority, complete authority, rests with the local government. Okay, so these are just a few sections of the general statutes that deal with, that talk about preservation commissions. And if you guys that serve on preservation commissions or that work with preservation commissions are not familiar with these general statutes, I encourage you to go home and read them in your spare time, because I know that you all have lots of time to spare. But anyway, those general statutes are 160A-400, and they start at point 1 and they go to point 13. And the general statutes specifically outline what the state's responsibilities are, and then what the responsibilities are of the local government and the commission. So I just included the statutes in the beginning of my presentation that talk about the state's responsibilities. So one of the responsibilities that we have that I mentioned earlier is that when local preservation commissions wish to designate a property as a local historic landmark, they have to write an investigative report. We call those investigative reports local designation reports. When those reports are submitted to our office for review and comment, we have 30 days to review those reports. We issue comment. Again, our comments are non-binding, but that is a role that we play under the general statute. Also, 409.d. If preservation commissions receive a COA application and they have questions about it, or they're not quite ready to make a ruling, and they want to get technical guidance from the Historic Preservation Office, they are welcome to table that decision, that COA application, invoking 160A-400.9D, stating we want to seek technical guidance from the HPO. That is completely allowed, but we cannot really offer technical guidance until the commission requests it. We cannot become involved in local matters. Okay. What am I doing wrong? Okay, there we go. So going back to the legal, okay? So there are certain powers that the federal government delegated to state governments, and the state governments have delegated to local governments. Think about your civics class back in high school, okay? Because we're going to get into a little bit of civics here. It was through the 10th Amendment. What are some powers that the federal government has that the state governments don't have? Can anyone think of anything? Can states declare war? No? No, they can't. No, they cannot declare war. Okay, what about print money? Are we printing money, our own currency here in North Carolina? No, we're not. We're not doing that. Okay, so there's two powers that the feds have that states don't have. So what about powers that have been delegated to the states by the federal government. What are some things that states can do that the feds can't do? What is the 10th Amendment all about? I'm going to help you guys out. Okay. Police power. Is anyone familiar with police power? What is it about? It's up there. It's the authority to attend to, protect, promote, regulate the general health, safety, and welfare of your citizens. Okay, so how do state and local governments exercise this police power? Can anyone think of a way that this is accomplished at the local level? Very good, that's excellent, yes. Give me specific codes and ordinances. John, in the first row at the first table. Exactly, zoning, okay, very good. Oh my gosh, I can't even work this thing. Yes, health or zoning ordinances, building codes, environmental regulations, sign regulations, subdivision regulations, which you kind of already said that too, public health regulations. How does this help local governments protect our health and safety? Well, when I go into a restaurant, I like to know that the public health department has been there to inspect the area, right? Like where my food is being prepared. So, you know, there's a certain level of cleanliness so that when I eat there, I'm not going to get sick, right? Like I like to look at the little rating, you know, around the cash register to make sure that this is an okay place to eat. What about before you go into a building? Most people automatically assume before entering a public building that that building's been inspected by a building inspector, right? And that it's safe to enter. What if we did away with all of these things, these regulations, these ordinances? Could you imagine living in a world where your water wasn't tested and inspected? That would be terrible. How would you know that your water was safe to drink? You wouldn't. Historic preservation ordinances. What does historic preservation have to do with protecting and promoting and regulating public health and safety? Or does it? Help me out. I'm sorry? Okay, I'm not interested in getting into politics today, sir. But I am interested in your participation. So politics aside, what do you think? How does historic preservation protect and promote and regulate, guys, the public health, safety, and welfare? Yes, in the back. Exactly, yes. It makes your community more pleasant to live in. What about economically? Yes.
Well, it's a tool. It's a tool to help rehab riders make them more safe and more settled options for economic development. Because if it's just sitting there, just not there, there's nothing going on with it, this is a tool that can help bring those projects back in.
Exactly. Yeah. Through historic preservation ordinances, we can keep historic properties from becoming dilapidated and then becoming a health and safety concern. Very good. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I went too far. Okay, so the general statute specifically outlines how a historic preservation commission should be established. You have to have at least 3 members. Some commissions, like Charlotte, have up to 12 members. Our office generally recommends having 5 to 7 members on your commission. They can serve no terms greater than 4 years. They just have to have a special interest in. So they don't have to be professionals in these areas, but they have to have a special interest in architectural history, prehistory, archaeology, public history, those types of fields. Again, just a special interest, okay? You can have advisory bodies, and every member on the commission has to reside within the jurisdictional territory of the municipality that's being served, okay? And there are different types of preservation commissions. So you can have a historic preservation commission, and through the ordinance, they have the authority to designate local historic landmarks and local historic districts. Now, is there any confusion out there about the difference between the two? What's a landmark? Go ahead. You got it.
It's a specifically designated structure, perhaps either in a national or local district or outside.
Okay, very good. It doesn't even have to be in a National Register listed district. So it's one property, basically, you're looking at. And then a district is a collection of properties. It's an area of historic properties. So then you have preservation commissions that just designate local landmarks. And I'll give you an example. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Local Landmarks Commission just focuses on landmarks. However, the city of Charlotte also has a preservation commission, and they are the Charlotte Historic Districts Commission, so they designate districts. And the two often overlap in their designations, which can be cause for some interesting situations. And then you can have planning boards. The city of Lexington, their preservation commission is actually their planning board. Okay, General Statute 400.8 outlines the responsibility of preservation commissions. Unfortunately, a lot of preservation commissions get pigeonholed into thinking that all they need to do is review COA applications. Does everyone know what COA means? Okay, good. Okay, don't want to lose anyone. But that's not true. The commission is also tasked with this responsibility of providing education and outreach opportunities to their constituents, for identifying and designating properties to be designated as local landmarks or districts. They need to maintain a building inventory. They need to know what they have and then maintain information on that. They also have the responsibility of negotiating with property owners should they decide or submit a COA to demolish a landmark or a landmark or a property within a district. Yes?
In our local district, it's kind of been a debate topic about funds as far as acquiring property.
Okay.
And some people have the opinion that it needs to be a 501c3, like a separate nonprofit to facilitate that. And then other individuals argue that it is within our jurisdiction to acquire property.
It is. It's outlined in the general statute, right there. So there you go. Charlotte has a revolving fund. I'm sure you may be familiar with their revolving fund. It's like millions of dollars. They've used it to acquire properties and then sell them to property owners that are interested in rehabilitating them. Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like Preservation North Carolina. So it's very similar. Okay. Here we go. I love this. This is one of my favorite slides in the presentation. Legislative findings, and this is outlined in 400.1. Why do we preserve historic properties? Okay, our legislators have said historic properties are one of the most important assets of our state. Okay, and how do we safeguard that heritage? Well, commissions do it by designating properties, by regulating changes made to those properties, by acquiring them through revolving funds and then selling them to property owners that are sympathetic to preservation, and through zoning. And we do this to promote the use and conservation for the education, pleasure, and enrichment of the residents of the city or county and as the state as a whole. So what you're doing is not just affecting your neighbors, it's not just affecting your children, your friends, your family who may live in Gastonia or Dallas or wherever you reside. What you're doing is for people all over the state of North Carolina. And North Carolina has such a rich heritage, and there's so many people who come here to visit because of that, that I would say you're benefiting people that live across the globe. This is a global initiative. It's not just local anymore. Okay, so what are commissions trying to preserve? The same things that are included in the National Register of Historic Places. We're trying to preserve buildings. We're trying to preserve objects. What would be an object? What's an example? Yes, in the back.
A friend of mine has a junkyard on a hill where the Danish people carved out things, and he's got a map of the old trading place carved on some slate there.
Okay. I'm not sure how significant that is.
It's awfully significant. Nobody else has a map of that thing.
Okay, let's think of ones that may be already listed in the National Register. Okay, objects. So we mentioned one earlier.
Liberty Bell.
The USS North Carolina, absolutely. Okay, very good. Sites, those are usually archaeological in nature. And then districts. And we've already kind of talked about those. Brett went into this a little bit more than I will this afternoon, but our GIS specialist has mapped over 100,000 properties that have been surveyed or listed in the National Register or been determined to be eligible for listing in the National Register either through an environmental project or meaning a federally funded project or a state funded project. Or ones that have been designated at the local level or surveyed through a federally funded project. And you can find every property in the state of North Carolina that has a physical street address. You can type in that physical street address, it'll come right up, and then you can see if that property has been surveyed or if it's been designated or listed. Okay? So, commissions. Again, they are required to inventory their historic properties or their properties in their communities and to maintain that inventory. And that's maintaining the inventory is usually done through architectural surveys and through survey updates. This is a power that they have under 400.8 of the statutes. If you are a CLG commission, there is grant funding available to help pay for architectural surveys and architectural survey updates. And then if you are a CLG commission and you think you need an update, maybe your National Register district was listed back in 1979, definitely time for an update. We usually recommend 10 to 15 years. Yes?
What are some of the benefits of updating your survey?
Okay, that's a great question.
We're trying to do this, but it takes funding and we have to put
Absolutely. Yeah, and you want to be able to give them an argument, right? Like a solid argument. So, is history static? I'm just going to throw that out there. No, it's not. So, what is the criteria, the age criteria for listing a property in the National Register? Brett mentioned it earlier. Bingo, 50 years. So, if you have a National Register listed district that was listed in the register in 1979, what would have been the cutoff date for the properties that would have been eligible as or would have been contributing buildings in that district? 79 minus 50 is what? 29? Okay, very good. So what does that cut out? You have craftsman bungalows that would not have been included. You have mid-century modern buildings that would have been included, meaning contemporaries, ranch houses, mini trads, mini traditionals. There's a number of properties that would not be included in that survey, but yet would be deemed historic today, right? By virtue of their age. Or could be deemed historic by virtue of their age. It all would depend on the level of integrity and their significance, right? But those properties would need to be reevaluated. So you have some commercial properties from the 50s. You have property owners that are interested in the tax credits. Well, their property is not a contributing element in that National Register district. But if you had a survey update, they were found to be contributing, then those property owners would be eligible for the tax credits. Does that make sense? All right, moving on. Okay, so when you start looking at properties, when you're doing surveys or you're looking to designate a historic property, there's two things that you need to consider. The first is special significance. Why is this property significant? Is it significant because of its history? Is it associated with a historical figure? Like Mount Vernon is obviously associated with George Washington, right? What about prehistory? Is there an archaeological site associated with this property? And culture. Maybe this property is significant culturally, but not really for any other reason. So there's that. Then you have to think about integrity. And when you think about integrity, you need to think about these things. Design. Does it still look the same as it did when it was first constructed? Setting. What does the area look like around the property? Was it a farmhouse and now it's surrounded by, commercial properties, development, residential areas? Materials. Did it have lap siding on the exterior and now it has vinyl siding? Did it have 6/6 wood double hung windows and now it has 1/1 vinyl? Are the materials still the same? Feeling and association. So if the person who originally lived in that house or even constructed that house were to come back today and see the property, would they recognize it? That's one way I think of feeling and association. Okay, 400.9. Once a property has been designated as a local landmark, or say if it's a property within a locally designated historic district, whenever a property owner wishes to propose or wants to construct an addition or maybe even a secondary building, say an outbuilding in the backyard, if they want to alter the property in some way, maybe they want to rip off the front porch like in the picture that Brett showed you and make the house look more federal than a AAA. Maybe they want to restore the property and they're going to be doing some major work, moving or demolishing the property. All of these actions require what's called a certificate of appropriateness. And this application should be reviewed by the local preservation commission. And the general statute also tells local preservation commissions that there is a standard that they have to follow when they are reviewing these applications. And that is, the commission shall take no action except to prevent that which would be incongruous with the special character of the landmark or district. So who can tell me what incongruity means? It doesn't fit in. Very good. It's not harmonious, right? What is special character? Okay, it can be architectural features. Very good. What else? Okay, if you're talking about districts, yeah, very good. What else? It's kind of like, this is the way I think of it, it's kind of a marriage between integrity and special significance. That's what I think of special character. So you're looking at the integrity and the special significance, okay? Do you agree, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, contextual standards. So when you're reviewing these COA applications, you're using these contextual standards. So The first one is incongruity, and we've already talked about when something's incongruous, it's not harmonious too. But you also have what's called tout ensemble, and I know I'm not pronouncing that right, it's a French term. My French is horrible, okay? Horrible. But tout ensemble, does anyone know what that means?
The whole thing together.
Very good, yes, the whole thing together. So when you're looking at a property like this one here, you're looking at not only the building itself, but also the features around it. Landscape features, retaining walls, sidewalks, driveways. What are they like? Are they unique in any way? And then if you're looking at designating a district, like how does this all fit together? And what kind of changes are we going to allow, and what things do we need to keep and protect? My supervisor, our Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Ramona Bartos, likens this to the pixels on a television screen. So does anyone remember old TV screens and the pixels? What happens if you change pixels on a picture or a television screen? What happens to the picture? Does it stay the same? Yeah, it distorts it. So what happens then if you change little elements in a historic district? Say you start allowing vinyl replacement windows. Say you go down and chop down all your mature trees when you once had this beautifully canopied, natural canopied street. Is that going to change your district? Is it going to change the special character? Absolutely. So you need to think about those things. Okay, this is one of my favorite quotes from David Owens, who is a professor in the University of North Carolina School of Government. You guys may be familiar with him. Him and Adam Lovelady just co-authored a book together, and it's the Quasi-Judicial Handbook. And this, if you don't have a copy of it and you're working with a Preservation Commission or you're serving on a Preservation Commission, I would really recommend you invest in this. I have, and it's amazing. So I really like what he has to say about design guidelines and standards. He says it is critical that the Commission limit itself to the application of the standards set by law. Now, how are these standards set by law? How are design guidelines adopted? Are they voted on? Like, does everyone agree, like it goes before the City Council and the City Council agrees to adopt them, right? Okay, very good. So, public opinion is irrelevant for quasi-judicial decisions. The question is whether the evidence supports the conclusion that the standards in the ordinance are or not met. A quasi-judicial decision is not a popularity contest. The Commission must fairly apply the standards in the ordinance regardless of popular opinion. Is this easier said than done? Yeah, it is, unfortunately. But I want you guys to keep this in mind the next time your neighbor comes in with a COA application and you're tempted to favor them somewhat or rule in their favor. That's right, yeah, you should be recusing yourself, and we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, how do we use these design guidelines, right? Well, or how should we approach writing design guidelines? Well, first of all, you need to know what the special character is of the landmark or the district that you're trying to preserve. That is absolutely essential. Before you write design guidelines, you have to know that, and it should also be spelled out in the designation ordinance for that landmark or district. If it's not, you need to start doing that, okay? And then, what is incongruous within the context? And the design guidelines should address that. Okay, so using design guidelines to make findings in a quasi-judicial setting. What are your findings of fact? You take the design guidelines and you start asking questions. What's being proposed, right? What are the original materials? What's the special character? And then step 2, what design guidelines apply to what's being proposed or these findings of fact? The COA decision should be based on the design guidelines and not on opinion. Okay, opinions cannot be held up in a court of law. Okay, so we specifically recommend for those commissions who do not have a set of design guidelines and you're using the Secretary of Interior standards, that's fine. But we encourage you to make an effort to develop your own set of design guidelines, and each set of design guidelines should be based on the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. So I took a screenshot here from the City of Raleigh, their design guidelines, and you can see point number 5. Distinctive materials, features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. Where have we heard that before? Did Brett just go over it? Yeah, does that sound like the standards? Absolutely. So their guidelines are specifically based in the standards. Okay. Okay, now. So I took a couple of screenshots from Charlotte's design guidelines because I think they have some excellent design guidelines. And what I like about Charlotte's is that they start off and they talk about what the commission does and their legal authority to act on what they're supposed to be doing, right? Then they outline the standards and they talk about how the standards were created and how they should be used. And then they talk about what their office does and the COA process, and they just lay all this information out. And then they go in and they talk about one by one the historic districts that have been designated locally. And this one is from Wesley Heights. Not only do they include an image of one of the properties within that district, but they also include an overall map of the district. So you have an idea of what the boundaries are for that district right away, before you even start reading about it. This is kind of an outline that they put together of the COA process so that their constituents will know what to expect when they submit a COA application. I think this is wonderful. Okay, what am I doing? Okay, also one thing that we recommend for design guidelines is to have illustrations. These illustrations should be clear, they should be easy to understand, they should be pretty generic, and user-friendly. Remember, your constituents are not architects, they're not planners, they're not architectural historians, they may not know what a sash is on a window, right? They may not know the difference between muttons and mullions. So your illustrations need to help them figure that out, right? Okay, 400.9, before a commission can even start reviewing COA applications, they have to have rules of procedure in place, and then they either have to be using the standards or they have to be using design guidelines. So you can't even start regulating changes to properties until those two things are in place. Minor works can be approved at the administrative or staff level, and denials can only come by the commission. So all applicants have the right to due process, meaning that they have the right to be heard, they have the right to have their project reviewed in a timely manner. There must be a public meeting, and everyone is allowed to participate in that meeting. Commissions have to act on COA applications within 180 days of filing. So you can't just sit on it and hope that it goes away. Again, we are available to offer technical advice. However, our comments are non-binding, and again, we cannot become involved in local matters. Appeals can be, a property owner can appeal a commission's decision, and those appeals usually go to the Board of Adjustment. Did you have?
We had a case go to our Board of Adjustments, and when the Board of Adjustments deals with the historic decision, they are handed we actually had discuss that with
Right, that's exactly right. So, and one important thing to remember, and I'll kind of touch on this a little bit later, is when if a case goes to the Board of Adjustment and they read the minutes from the meeting, okay? They're not going to read the general statutes, they're not going to read the design guidelines. So when you go to make a motion on a case, it's very important that you specifically cite the design guideline that's being applied. Okay, and some commissions even read the entire design guideline because, again, the Board of Adjustment is not going to go back and read those. And again, if you base your findings in opinion and you say, well, I make a motion to approve this because, you know, my grandma did the same thing and I just really like that and my gut is telling me that this is okay. I've heard this before. You may think I'm joking, but I've been to several commission meetings and I've actually heard this said. What do you think the Board of Adjustment is going to do with a finding like that? Do you think they're going to uphold that? No, they're not. Why would they? But if it's based in fact, will they uphold that? More likely. Okay, 400.13. Ordinary maintenance is not prohibited. So what would be ordinary maintenance? Exactly. Changing light for light, or changing a light bulb, or maybe replacing your mailbox, or some people don't some commissions don't regulate paint color, so painting the exterior of your house is not a big deal. Definitely painting the interior is not a big deal. So those kind of changes are not prohibited. If it's unsafe, that property is unsafe, safety trumps preservation. And commissions need to exercise common sense. The use of a property, the owner is not prevented from making any use of property not prohibited by another law. So, quasi-judicial. What makes COA hearings, or the act of hearing a COA, a quasi-judicial action? Can anyone tell me? It's right up here. You can even read it if you want to. I'm giving this to you guys, right here. Giving it to you.
The judgment call.
Yeah, okay, it's a judgment. You're making a judgment, okay? Based on what? Very good, facts. You're making a judgment based on facts, okay? So, GS 409C and D tells us how these quasi-judicial hearings should be heard and conducted. Judicial responsibilities. This is kind of hard to see. What do judges do? They interpret the law. They assess evidence that's being presented, right? They control courtroom proceedings. And the rulings must be impartial, objective, and fair. So how is that different than what a commission does? Well, let's look at the characteristics of a tribunal board, okay? Or the characteristics of a judicial board. The tribunal, they possess powers and procedures resembling those of a court of law or judge. They're obliged to objectively determine facts. Do commissions do that? Yeah, they should be. And they draw conclusions from the facts presented to provide the basis of an official action. So what do preservation commissions do? Do they review cases? Yes, they do. They follow established rules of procedure? They should. What about adhering to the NC Open Meetings Law? Hopefully that you guys are doing that. And hopefully you're offering fair and objective decisions based on Secretary of Interior standards or your design guidelines. Roles and responsibilities. Does everyone know what the chair should be doing? Do we have any commission chairs here? Excellent, John Dearman. Excellent. I don't know you in the back. You don't have to introduce yourself now. We can talk later. Yeah, but hopefully you know that this is what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be facilitating conversation or communication, right, amongst the commissioners. You should know the rules. You should remain impartial. And you should seek contributions from all the commissioners, okay? So you may have silent Susie sitting in the corner, like she always sits in the same place at the table. She never says anything because she's afraid. You need to draw her out. She needs to be participating, okay? And there's nothing wrong with silent Susie, but give her some confidence, help her out. Staff, okay. Do we have any staff in the audience? Excellent. I thought I saw you guys earlier. Thank you for coming. What do you guys do as staff? You should be preparing a staff report for your commission to review, right? So that they know what is being proposed, and also what design guidelines apply to the case. It makes the commissioners' jobs a lot easier to review these staff reports, and hopefully, commissioners, you are reviewing these before you get to the COA hearing. There are some times when the staff sends out these reports, and yeah, they're ripping them open when they get to the meeting. Does that show your constituents that you're prepared? Absolutely not. Yikes. Staff recommendations can also be included in these reports. Okay, commissioners, what do you need to be doing? Do you need to show up prepared? Yes, read the staff reports, please, before you come to the meeting. Please be on time. I know that a lot of people work during the day and sometimes you get caught in traffic. We got caught in traffic today and we're late. That's understandable, but don't make it a habit. Definitely try to be on time. Be present. What does that mean? You're sitting there, aren't you present? Exactly. I went to a commission meeting when I first started in this position and was blown away because, oh my gosh, someone was on their cell phone the entire meeting. Texting, surfing the web, and I was just like, I do not have a poker face. So anytime someone does something wrong, I'm just like, oh my gosh. The whole time. Yeah, it was bad. Please put your cell phones away. And please be present mentally and physically. And also be professional. These people, sometimes it's really scary standing before a commission of people they don't know, and maybe they're not familiar with this process. Maybe they have stage fright or anxiety. Be professional, be kind. Put them at ease. But don't get too friendly. Okay, public meetings. There's a difference between a COA hearing and a public meeting, right? Public meetings are usually to inform your public, right? Or to educate them about something. And, you have open Q&A, kind of like today, right? This is kind of like an informal public meeting. Public hearing is a little bit different. There are rules of procedure that guide the way that meeting is to be conducted, based on process, and it's supported by a local ordinance. Okay, open meetings law also applies, okay? Open to the public, and that means everyone. You cannot turn someone away from these meetings. Even the town crazy is allowed to attend, even though you may not want them to be there. And open meetings laws apply when there's 2 or more people, okay, of a quasi-judicial body meeting. Those meetings can occur even when you're doing like a webinar or a conference call or whatever. So be careful and think about that. And definitely take full and accurate meeting minutes, okay? That's just a simple CYA thing. Be smart. Okay, and act well by part. When you, as a commission, as the chair, as staff, when you are going to have a public meeting or a COA hearing, consider, does the AV equipment work? Can everyone in the room hear you? If it's being recorded, is it coming through clearly on the recording? That can be kind of scary. Begin the meeting on time. We've already talked about that. Act with confidence and professionalism. Prepare an agenda and follow it. If you're not preparing agendas for these meetings, please start. That way everyone knows what's going on and they're all on the same page. Oh my goodness. Okay, introduce key participants. The chair should be introducing every member of the commission, and then you may want to introduce the town attorney or any other special person that's in the room. Review how the meetings will proceed with your audience. The commission chair should talk about this. You could say, we're going to start by swearing in all those who wish to participate today. Then we will move to this. Then we will do this. Give them an idea of what they can expect. Explain to the audience how they can participate. If you're a stakeholder in this, or if you wish to give testimony, this is how you can participate, and this is when you can expect to speak. Review the commission's legal requirements. I can't stress this enough. I think a lot of people just think of the commission as the pretty police, and you guys are just up there to kind of offer your opinion and give your blessing just at your whim, but that's not what you're there to do at all. Respect all individuals and their opinions. There are some reactions I've seen that are kind of like my own. When someone proposes something, you just want to go, or just put your head in your hands, but you can't react that way. We all have different opinions, and we need to be respectful. You need to be consistent in the way you hold your meetings and also in your decisions. And then we need to be ethical, okay? I found this cartoon, I thought it was cute, but obviously it's not getting the type of laughs I was hoping it would. So we'll move on. Conflicts of interest. Okay, we talked a little bit about recusal earlier and when you should recuse yourself. I get a lot of questions about this. In fact, I got a phone call not too long ago when the guy was like, so I know that if a carpenter is doing work on a house or an architect is designing new construction for a property, then they should definitely recuse themselves if they're on the commission and they're hearing the COA for that property. But, we have a mason and he's doing some work for some properties in the historic district, and I don't think he needs to recuse himself. I'm thinking, why not? Okay, I should have read this to him, but didn't have it at the time. The question is not whether the commissioner is able to vote impartially. You can argue that all day long, right? This is the question. The question is whether the potential conflict is enough to create a reasonable doubt as to whether the commissioner will vote impartially on the merits of the case. So you may want to share this with your commissioners. If there's any doubt that they can vote impartially on the merits of the case, they need to recuse themselves. Okay, staff reports. There are some commissioners that do not have the luxury of receiving staff reports. If you are staff and you are not preparing reports for your commission, I strongly encourage you to start. They should contain clear and current images of the subject property, detailed scope of work, maps of the project area, and architectural drawings when necessary. Applications for certificates of appropriateness should be reviewed within 180 days of filing. We've already talked about that. Okay, commissioners are allowed to make site visits. Okay, this is outlined in the general statute. I've had some commissioners say, oh no, we've been told we can't do that. That is false. And if property owners have a problem with it or you're getting kind of pushback from that, you may want to consider doing what other municipalities have done, and that's put a disclaimer in your COA application saying you can expect a commissioners or a commission member or somebody is going to stop by your property and take a look at it and see what's being proposed. They don't like it, that's too bad. It's in there. These are available resources to commissioners serving as on a quasi-judicial body. If you do not have these resources, they are available on Amazon for purchase. Again, I highly recommend the quasi-judicial handbook. Okay, when serving on a local preservation commission, you guys probably know all of these already. Put your cell phones away, arrive on time, be prepared. Do not fail to acknowledge your constituents. Do not assume you know more than you do about the project. Do not conceal a conflict of interest, please, because that could land you in a whole lot of trouble. Do not engage in side conversations. You could be accused of ex parte communication if you do that. Do not base your decision on opinions and attempt to question and find facts about subjects outside the commission's purview. I'll give you an example of that later. Do not try to redesign a project. Again, remember what the general statute says. The commission shall take no action except to prevent that which would be incongruous. That does not give you the liberty to redesign projects. And again, do not base your opinions on, or your facts, or your findings on opinion, excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example of how to make a motion. And then we have one example here. Okay, would anyone like to help me out and read this? Who has a loud voice? Any former cheerleaders? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, the reuse of the building as a barber shop is unsuitable for the neighborhood because we do not need two barber shops on Main Street.
Okay, very good. So I want you guys to tell me, after she reads this, what is good about this motion and what's bad about this motion. Thank you, continue.
And I find that if the applicant is unwilling to use the building as a cat cafe, the application may be acceptable to the County Historical Society. Therefore, I move that we do not approve application number 209-01 for 224 Main Street as submitted, unless the applicant is willing to use the building as a cat cafe and restore the adjacent building, which I'm certain is also owned by Demo Your Way development.
So, is this good? Is it not good? Tell me.
Terrible.
Tell me.
No findings of fact and no guidelines.
Exactly. Where was there, not one guideline was mentioned this whole time, right? Do they even exist? We wouldn't know. I don't even know if this commission has a design guidelines or Secretary of Interior standards because they're not even mentioned, right? What else is wrong with this?
It's full of actions beyond the commission's authority.
Thank you. Yes. Can they determine or tell a property owner how to use their property? Absolutely not. That's specifically stated in the general statute. What else? Sole opinion. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Anyone want to read this one for me? You have such a loud, clear voice. Would you like to read it again? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have studied the application and all other relevant documents and presentations related to this case, and I am familiar with the parcel located in the historically significant Rail Yard Historic District, which is important to this community for its association with the 1890s railroad industry. I find the plan submitted by the applicant does not comply with the provisions of the county's historic preservation ordinance. I move the commission deny application number 209-01 for 224 Main Street because the application does not meet the following criteria. Number one, the proposed new construction does not comply with section 4.6 new construction within historic districts. And number two, the materials, height, scale, and design of the proposed new construction does not comply with subsection 4.5.6 and 4.6.7 of the design guidelines, which preserve the historic district's industrial feeling, character, and association.
Okay, good or bad?
Good.
Good. What's the difference? It's specific, okay? Give me more specifics. Give me some specifics.
Going step by step to the specifics.
Okay?
I looked at all the evidence, I find that it doesn't comply, I prove that it doesn't comply because it doesn't comply with this specific, that specific, and the other specific.
Very good. So I love how he starts off. He dresses the chair, right? And he says, I've studied the application. So he's telling the constituent right off the bat and the commission, I'm prepared. I've studied this application. I know what's going on. He also says, I'm familiar with this property. And he even tells where it's located in the historic district. It's in the local historic district. So that means, or it tells me, that there's a probability, a good probability, that he's done a site visit before the meeting, right? He's familiar with this property. Then he says, I find the plans are not, do not comply with the provisions of the county's local historic preservation ordinance. So he cites the ordinance. And then, meaning he's read the ordinance that defines the special character of the historic district, and he knows that what's being proposed does not comply with that. It is incongruous with the special character of that district. Then he goes on to apply the design guidelines. He makes a clear motion. I make a motion to deny this, and I do it based on this design guideline and this design guideline. Now, how do you think the Board of Adjustment is going to react to this? Do you think they'll be more likely to uphold this decision? Yes. Yes.
What about the findings of facts? That's something that's kind of more on the lot findings of facts. That go through prior to
Mm-hmm.
Can you touch on those a little bit? That's one thing that with, when we had this whole issue with adjustments.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the interest of time, I have 30 minutes. Can we talk about this after? I'm sorry, guys. Always remember, courts are going to uphold decisions that are based in fact. Stay clearly within the area of your responsibility outlined in your ordinance. Always be sure to allow commissioners to make motions in order. I've been to some commission meetings where commissioners go to make a motion, and then these other commissioners start talking and saying, well, you need to add this, and you need to add that, and don't forget this, and you need to include this. And so this person can't even finish making a motion and literally has to type out on his computer everything so that when he goes to make the motion, he includes everything that all of the commissioners want him to say in the motion. Now, is that how it should be done? Absolutely not. Not at all. Okay, speak clearly and concisely to the audience and each other. Include crucial details that will make your decision clear and easy to understand to individuals who are not present in the room, specifically those who may be serving on the Board of Adjustment. Offer a summary of the proceedings and explain the next steps in the process to your constituent. So their COA has been denied. What did they do? Their COA has been tabled. What did they do? What can they expect? They need to know that. And then thank everyone who participated. Okay, so moving on. We're going to talk a little bit about certified local governments and what that means. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the National Historic Preservation Act and how it was established in 1966. And it created a framework for the feds and the states to work together. The act was amended in 1980 to allow local governments to become a player in the federal preservation program, okay, through certification by the National Park Service. So, commissions who want to become certified have to do certain things, but the 1980 amendment decentralized the partnership between the feds and the states, allowing locals to participate. It gave them, local governments, a formal role in the national program. It also required historic preservation offices to give 10% of the funding that we receive to certified local governments through grant awards annually. CLG status, this means that the community has made an official public commitment to historic preservation. And hopefully they uphold that commitment. There are certain operating standards, and they have to complete 3 hours of training annually. And again, if you're here today, this definitely counts if you're a CLG commission towards that 3 hours, or it will be 3 hours. We offer 3 regional CLG trainings every year. Friday, we will have the Piedmont Regional CLG training, May 18th. We will be hosting one in Hendersonville for the western region of the state. on August 17th. And then we just scheduled one for the eastern region of the state. It will be September 21st, which is also a Friday in New Bern. And I just set up a training calendar on our website, so if you ever have questions about training, you're more than welcome to call me, but you can also refer to our training calendar now. Okay, responsibilities of commissions. We've kind of already talked about this a little bit. Just so you know, there are over 100 local preservation commissions scattered throughout the state of North Carolina. There are 51 certified local governments scattered throughout the state. There is one person who works with all of those local preservation commissions and certified local governments, providing technical assistance in areas related to their responsibilities as commissioners and staff, and that person is me. So you're welcome to call me, email me at any time, because I am working with everyone. I may not respond to your call or your email right away, but I do try to adhere to the 24-hour policy, and will try to get back to you as soon as I can. It is a pleasure. I love the work that I do. Commissions are amazing, and so are the staff. So we do have a statewide historic preservation plan. If you're not familiar with that plan, I recommend you check it out. And now I'm going to move into historic preservation funding, okay? This is available to certified local government commissions. Okay, so this funding was set up and authorized by the 66 Act. However, the funding didn't become really available until 10 years later in 76. Under the provisions of the NHPA, again, state historic preservation offices are required to give CLG commissions 10% of funding through grant awards. 1980, Congress amended the act to allow local governments to participate in the federal preservation program. So the funding source, if you have a neighbor or a family member that comes up to you and they're like, well, you're just using taxpayer dollars to, update that survey or to restore that historic property. That's actually not true. Funding comes from Outer Continental Shelf oil lease revenue and not tax dollars. My colleague, Michelle McCabe, actually coined this, which I think is really clever. You're using natural resources, non-renewable resources, to preserve cultural resources. I really like that. Okay, funding made available. The HPF is authorized at $150 million annually. How much money do you think we get of that $150 million? Or how much money do you think historic preservation offices get of that $150 million? That's a lot of money, huh? Yeah, yeah, $150, that's about right. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding, totally kidding. You can edit that out of the recording. I didn't say that. The funds are appropriated by Congress. In FY 2016, they were appropriated to 50 states, all U.S. territories, and tribes for $46 million out of $150 million. Where's the other 100 and what? Help me out. $4 million? Where did that go? I don't know. The HPF helps historic preservation offices and TIPOs carry out their responsibilities. Oh my gosh, what did I just do? Okay, so grant applications are always available in November. You have a couple of months to get those applications in. It's about a 2-page form. If you have a project in mind, contact our office right away. You don't have to wait until November. We're happy to talk to you about it. We're also happy to help you complete the application. The applications are usually due in late February. However, it just depends on the administration as well, and funding, and how funding and when funding is appropriated to Congress and to the National Park Service. So this year, applications were not due until the end of March because funding came in later. Eligible applicants. So if you are a CLG municipality, The local governments would be eligible. The Preservation Commission would be eligible. Nonprofits within the jurisdiction of that commission would be eligible, or that municipality. Educational institutions are eligible. However, private property owners and religious institutions are not eligible. We receive so many phone calls all the time saying, I have this historic house and I need some money to fix it up. And we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, we don't have anything for you. So if you have or get phone calls of that nature, please share that information with them and don't send them to our office. But you can if you want to, but it would be really helpful. If you could just tell them up front. These are the type of projects that are eligible for funding: architectural and archaeological surveys, nominations for districts and properties that are not listed in but are currently eligible for listing, survey publications. These come after survey updates, or surveys are performed of counties or towns, cities, educational workshops and training. A CLG grant was awarded last year for a cemetery training workshop in Hillsborough. This workshop was phenomenal and very successful. They had 50 participants, some from as far west as, I want to say, High Point, and some from as far east as New Bern. So if you are thinking you want to do maybe like a trades fair or a window repair workshop or anything of that nature, and you are a CLG commission, you can apply for funding to help fund that. Also, restoration of National Register listed properties. They have to be listed in the National Register in order to get funding for that. Studies, and then also local preservation design guidelines and plans. Yes, in the back.
What about acquisition?
No,
Just restoration?
just restoration. Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Okay, so in most recent years, our office has received anywhere from $85,000 to $105,000 to appropriate to CLG commissions through grant awards. And remember, how many certified local governments do we have? 51, yeah. So how far do you think $85,000 is? Not very far. It is a very competitive application. Communities are expected to provide a 40% match. However, if communities cannot provide that match, we will work with those communities. We just need to make sure that there is a local commitment to the project. Okay, grant applications. These are some of the points or some of the elements that are going to make your grant application more competitive. And you cannot hire a consultant or a contractor and have them start work before you submit the application. And this is a matching grant. It's a reimbursement grant. And we will help you throughout the whole process. This is a timeline of when the applications are due, and it kind of walks you through step-by-step deadlines for each and every part of the process. This is what you can expect the second fiscal year and when projects should wrap up and work should be complete. We've kind of already talked about that. This is a list of entities that also provide grant funding. There aren't, unfortunately, a lot of resources or options out there for preservation work. And I don't know why, but there are a few. The Marion Covington Foundation is a very popular one. I believe that they only award grants for properties that are listed in the National Register. I could be wrong. And then also we learned yesterday that the Save America's Treasures grant may be coming back, which is exciting news. And questions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you are, get stage fright and you don't want to ask me now, you can call my office or email me. I'm more than happy to talk to you. even after this presentation is over. But you wanted to talk about findings of fact. Let's see if we can go back. I don't know if we can go back to the slides.
I
Well-
guess my question is procedurally for making a motion.
Mhm.
We put up our 5 findings of facts.
Okay.
The overhead, and we go through yes, no, all that, the amount.
Okay.
What is that a way or a better way?
I can't say that I've ever seen that done before, to be honest with you. So if it works for your commission and you feel that it's helping you guys get to a sound, like making the correct decision faster and more effectively, then I say that's fine. So I don't think that that's wrong. So, anyone else? Yeah.
I think to elaborate on that, going to the findings of fact, I might have misunderstood kind of what you said there. So you go through each one of them and like yes, no. Each finding should be supported by its own substantial and competent evidence along there. A yes, no finding in there is something it's easy for a review body, whether it's that board of adjustment or superior court, to look to and be like, no, this needs to be supported by further evidence. So take each of those findings as an opportunity to explain as much as you can, especially in those cases that you think could be subject to further judicial review or appeal. So again, just beefing it up as much as you can, explaining through that process. But the findings should come first and be supported by that final motion as the result. But
And here-
again, can reiterate a lot of those points. But if you lay out your findings of fact well, your motion should be real tight and easy to form at the
Thank you. These are just a couple of questions I think I had for people to consider when they are making findings of fact. What's the special character? What are the materials? And that evidence, like you said, will help make you make the motion later and provide more, what's the word I'm looking for? Concrete, like, evidence. Is that the word I'm looking for? When, yeah, you gotta make your motion.
I think another thing to keep in mind, and just kind of coming from the planning and zoning side, we sit in a lot of these QJ trainings for all of our other boards, but it's something that gets lost procedurally is, for example, if one of your board members should vote against one of the findings, they are obligated to vote against the whole motion itself. Because if one of the findings fails, it all fails through there. So if one board member votes against, they're obligated to vote against at the end. At the same time, if your board as a majority votes against one of the findings, they need to continue through the findings of fact, finish the procedure, and say if they fail on the first finding, it's essentially done at that point to continue on. The other more complex part of that is, say you have a 5-member commission, 2 members vote against item 1, another 2 members vote against item 2. Well, you failed there again because they're obligated to get them and vote against the motion as a whole. You mentioned Adam Lovelady, a great resource for quasi-judicial training, and the new publication itself. But it seems like a lot of effort to go through the quasi-judicial training for those certificates for pertinence, but I think it's extremely necessary just to make sure you don't have procedural missteps.
Absolutely. And Adam Lovelady is also available to answer questions. You can look him up on the web. He takes phone calls. He will answer your emails. He's really good about that. So don't hesitate to reach out to either our office or to Adam or David when you have procedural questions. Does anyone else have any questions? I know my presentation was long. Yes?
Would you put your contact information back up on the screen?
Oh, absolutely. And I have business cards, although they're outdated. I got married 6 weeks ago. Yeah, I never thought it would happen, but it did. And I'm 39, I'll be 40 this year. So I was really on my way to like being the cat lady, old maid cat lady. And I think it surprised everyone, like especially my dad. Almost blew him away. And my brother too, he was like, who is this guy? He's willing to marry you. But now my last name is Stimson. It used to be Kidd. So everyone used to joke, you'll always be a kid. Well, guess what? They were wrong. Thank you. I don't know how to work this. I got 3 hours of sleep last night, so I'm just not really thinking very clearly. But there it is in all its glory, my new last name. So, yes, I can definitely share these. These will be made available to you if you want them. I don't know how useful this was to you. I really hope it was. Yes?
You had an image that showed the good proposal, or not proposal, I'm sorry, motion.
Uh-huh.
And in that, you stated where it did not meet the guidelines. Should you say why it doesn't meet the guidelines too?
Yes, absolutely. If you're denying it, you need to state why it doesn't meet the guidelines. And the second motion was denying it because it didn't meet the guidelines.
But stating why it doesn't meet.
Exactly, absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm sorry that I didn't do that. Yeah, what would we do without Jeff? So anyway, any more questions or comments? Okay, now you guys are ready to get out of here, so I'm